our social media.
Have we all had a chance to look at the agenda? Need a
Yes.
motion to approve?
So moved.
For a second? Is there a second?
Me, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Is there anyone from the public here? Online? The consent agenda is the minutes from the March 19th meeting. You take a minute to review those. Are there any comments on the minutes? We also have on the consent agenda the review and approval of a resolution authorizing the extension of the line of credit financing. Any comments on that? This is in tab 2.
Well, I was pleased to see that this line of credit will promote the morals and proprieties of the citizen. Well, lines of credit could do that, so. Just leave it up.
We have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Member and community updates. Any updates on community meetings?
We haven't had one recently.
Anything from finance and audit, Mr. Jinks?
nothing?
And we don't have anything from governance at the moment. We have the update on enhancements to the payment assistance program.
Mr. Bill, maybe back a few agenda items. The resolution needs to be signed by Ms. Calderelli, so if we could get a signature on that after the meeting, that'd be great. For the upcoming meetings, we wanted to flag that staff have started to plan the board retreat for early 2025. We're targeting February. We're trying to line up some speakers now for the retreat. We mentioned in an email recently that we'd like to focus the retreat on rate design, specifically looking at our commercial rate and affordability. So the idea was on a Friday afternoon, we'd have 3 guest speakers come in. After that, we would go out for dinner and then have a half day on Saturday, going through the rate structure in response to some of the email that we had back and forth over the past few weeks. It was something that we wanted to revisit, at least with respect to our commercial rate design anyway. So that's an initial draft. We haven't gotten a final agenda together yet, but we're working on that. Wanted to note that we'd like to be bringing an agenda to the board and that it might be half of a Friday.
Will the discussion of affordability and customer assistance, will that delay our initiative if we decide we wanted this coming session of the General Assembly to seek legislative authority?
No.
See, they work in parallel. Okay, good.
Nice. Updates on our payment assistance program. We have 3 key highlights to share this evening. There's been a few events over the last month since our last meeting that staff have participated in. Mr. Akankube attended a CFO forum. I'll let him give a quick highlight on that. Ms. Waters attended a affordability panel as part of Water Week last Thursday, and I attended VWWAA last Monday. I'll start. We have some meetings scheduled with other authorities in Virginia that we're setting up to discuss affordability. There are some other authorities looking at affordability in Virginia. They're looking at it through both the potential GA lens as well as a lens of working around the edges and using non-rate revenue. So we're looking forward to those discussions. Two larger authorities in the Commonwealth of Virginia that we'll be talking with in the next few weeks.
And which are those?
Prince William County and then Western Virginia Water Authority. And both of them are currently using customer assistance programs that are non-rate funded, that are funded by non-rate revenue. We had also discussed potentially having a larger discussion with Loud and Water. They're going through a GM transition right now, so we're gonna let them get settled in before we reach out to their new GM. Maybe a quick overview of what the purpose of the forum was and what we presented.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Carl. So at the CFO forum, you had different sizes, different water and wastewater utility facing different affordability challenges depending on how the city or the jurisdiction is formed. A lot of utilities are using the in-house customer assistance program, similar to like our LEAP program. A few of the utilities have the rate funded assistance program, but very few of those, and they are slightly governed a little bit different than we all utilities are in Northern Virginia. But there's still a big talk across the industry about using some form of rate funded program going forward, especially given the impact of like you're seeing larger write-offs across all utilities, which is impacting the rate, but there's still an big ongoing discussion just across all utilities. But and overall, a lot of the utilities are using a similar program to like our LEAP program in-house assistance.
Last week was Water Week. On Wednesday, AlexRenew partnered with Loud and Water and with HRSD to go up and advocate with our congressional delegation for permanent LIWA, fully funding SRF, and some liability protection under PFAS circular rule. On Thursday, I attended the Affordability Roundtable that Mr. Carl referenced. That was hosted by NACWA, Policy Link, and the Center for Water Security and Cooperation. And the purpose of it was to have a dialogue about how we can address federally, how we can address affordability, how we can ensure that there's a permanent funding program. It was a good discussion. It was we had NRDC at the table, several utilities, all the national associations, and we ended in a place where there's going to be summary points, and we'll get back together periodically to discuss next steps. It was worthwhile.
Thank you. Any questions, any comments?
Maybe one more item, if Mr. Robertson could update us on the status of LEAP while we're on this topic.
Sure. So Dollar Energy has been pursuing partnerships with several nonprofits in the area. They've reached out to like 21 different groups. There's a few very promising leads they hope to sort of settle that partnership within the next week or two. Christchurch is on the list. Housing Alexandria is another. They've also reached out to United Way and got some interest there, as well as Landmark Church. And then also Grace Episcopal showed some interest, but the person that would be in charge of that program is out of town. So maybe a few weeks before we hear back from that. That's sort of the update. That I talked to the rep right before this meeting, and he was pretty optimistic, basically, that they would at least have a partner or two in the next 14 days.
Thank you.
And then update on Spring to Action.
Oh, sure, yeah. So we promoted Spring to Action on social media channels. We also sent it out as an all customer email on Friday along with the open house reminder. So we did get some feedback from that as well as a couple donations. So that was all promising. But we'll continue to promote it leading up to Spring to Action. It's still early donations right now.
It's very good to see the amount of interaction we're getting with a lot of different groups. These things.
I think the last piece too, we will likely update the board at the next meeting is we're trying to finalize our lease agreement with the city for the 5th floor. That's another avenue for funding. And we're also finalizing a billing services agreement with the city for the city's contributions to the billing services we bill on their behalf. So there was one in place for GCWW. We need to finalize the new agreement, get it over to the city. That's another potential source of non-rate revenue that could fund the cap.
Thank you. The next item is the draft operating capital budget.
Yes, so Ms. Callahan's going to walk through a present, oh no, I'm sorry. I'm ahead of myself. Maybe a few things on the budget. Thank you to the board, Mr. James, for sharing the comments yesterday. At the same time, we were getting in our amortization schedule for the new bond, and we got that in yesterday. Mr. Jenks has noted in your comments, our budget was underfunded for that line item in the debt service payments associated with our new bonds. So what we have done this evening is we have revised in your green folders, a few things. In your green folders, you'll find a packet that's binder clipped. On that cover is a revised memo than what you received in your board packet in advance of the meeting with an updated budget number of 234.1. That accounts for the 1.6 and $2.8 million payments that we'll need to make to support our bond. After that page, what we tried to do for just a quick summary this evening is we put in our revenues and expenses for the FY 2025 budget. What we presented last meeting was the total budget of 230 million in revenue and expenses. That's the preliminary draft budget. And then the updated budget of 234.1 is on the next slide and showing the relationship between the revenues and expenses. Where you'll see the numbers change, and I'll stop talking if there's questions in a second. Where you see the numbers change is our debt service value has changed in the expenses category, the greenish blue, as well as our capital outlay on both sides of the revenues and expenses. So what we've also done in response to the schedule received yesterday, we went through and we updated the entire budget. And we also included some additional detail on the revenues for the 10-year CIP on page 4. On page 14. The change to the debt service pretty much impacted the entire budget document, so we had to reissue the entire budget document. And we felt that big of a delta, it warranted revising the budget now before we go to public hearing, given that the numbers were so far off from the initial placeholder estimate we had at the time of the draft.
questions?
And questions, since I have a chance to think through this. It would be helpful to put like on charts like these revised and the date they got revised so that I know graphs of the budget we've had, in the sense of we start, we got another one, we got one in our packet, we got one here, so.
So we need a motion to approve the draft budget, to authorize the CEO to post notice of a public hearing to receive comments, and also to update the winter quarter average portion of the rates, rules, and regulations. So, correct?
Correct.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to new business.
So we asked Ms. Gallahan, our chief HR officer, to come in this evening to talk a little bit about our compensation policy as an organization. There's a few reasons we're doing this now. One, it aligns with our budget cycle and helps to inform where some of the numbers are coming from in our draft budget. It also educates the board on the compensation philosophy that was set in 2010 and how that has guided us as staff in hiring and setting up our benefits program. Then two other reasons we wanted to discuss it this evening. One was to share the results of our biannual compensation study results. We have those and they're contained within the presentation this evening. And then open the discussion with the board over the next few months of some changes we might want to make to the compensation philosophy. Now that you have a full view of how it informs the organization, and it is a little long in the tooth. It does date back 14 years to 2010 with no major updates since then. So it's really meant as an informational presentation this evening. It helps answers questions regarding the current budget and also where we're going as an organization to attract and retain our workforce. Two notes for administration is there were two slides that received very minor updates that were in your green folders. One is the pretty results of the compensation study, the bar chart that's in the folder. Simply just changed a label up at the top on the chief engineering position. And then a change to the AlexRenew commuting patterns. We noted that our max remote work policy is 2 days per week for staff. It's just reflected on the slide. So two very minor administrative changes. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Callahan.
Thank you. And I met Mr. Jenks. I haven't met Mrs. Hammer. Nice to meet you. Adriana. Hi. All right. You've already read all this information and you're educated. I know you got a heads up. All right. So back in 2010, the board implemented a compensation philosophy, and the three main things that were targeted in the compensation philosophy was to make sure that they were providing guidance, make sure we were comparable to the other jurisdictions, that we were targeting salaries, whether it be to recruit or whether it was promotions, making sure our employees are paid a competitive wage, anywhere from 90 to 110% of the salary range. You sometimes will hear the compa ratio. So 90 to 110% means 10% below the midpoint or 10% above the midpoint. You also sometimes hear 50th percentile or median as that midpoint. So just some of those words are interchanged. And then of course, committing to do a salary study every 2 years. So every even year, we hire a third party to do a market study. And we'll get into the details of that. Okay with that? A little bit more background. You've probably seen this in the news about the water sector and the silver tsunami and the number of folks that have been retiring. For your benefit to understand, we really have already seen that happen in our workforce. I went back and looked. So when I first got here back in like fiscal 2012, our average service was about 20 years. Now our average service is more like 6. So the course of like from fiscal 12 to fiscal 18, we had 24 people retire over that span. And then we got down to about 11 years of service. And then from like fiscal 19 to fiscal 23, we had like another 23 people retire, because we all know with COVID, a lot of people decided to retire. With our highest year in fiscal 21, we had 10 people retire. And that was during the, again, aftermath of some of COVID. So we really, over the time that I have been here, have seen it. We've already seen that flow of the retirement. We're on the backside of it now. We only have a handful of folks that are really close to that 30-year or even the 20+ year. So I'd say we're more building the workforce versus having to worry so much about the retirement. It's always going to be there, but certainly not that big bubble when I first got here. We knew there was like half the organization was going to retire. And that was some of the reasons we built up some programs that we did. This was a good picture or illustration of kind of where this whole Commonwealth of Virginia is at when it comes to unemployment. Because we hear to the challenge of finding workers. The latest statistic was that for every 47 available workers, there's only 47 available workers to every 100 jobs. So everybody is, trying to get workers or the best workers that they can when there's not enough of them to go around. The two charts on the side too kind of talk a little bit about the folks that live in Alexandria. There's very few of them that actually live and work in Alexandria versus people that commute into the city or out of the city to go to work. And then just another piece about education, talking about this Alexandria versus the Commonwealth of Virginia, where you'll see in Virginia, which is the top bar, you'll see more people have high school or GED education versus when you get further down, you're going to see the city of Alexandria has the higher educated bachelor's degree, graduate degree versus the state as a whole. A lot of that has to do with Northern Virginia, federal government jobs, things of that nature too.
Back up, please.
Yes, I can.
What is the quit rate and the hiring rate?
What's the quick one?
The quit rate.
Our turnover rate?
Yes, no, here on the slide.
Oh, quit rate. Oh, I'm sorry. That's of the people that voluntarily resign.
Here, and the hiring rate is the percent of people you hire.
The hiring rate is how many positions you hire according to the number of positions you have open.
Is this per 100 jobs?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We all know this, but just so that you have a idea of the Commonwealth of Virginia as a whole, when you look at the whole Virginia, the average median household income is around $80,000, $81,000 a year. Alexandria is actually 30% higher. So even though we might strive to hire folks in Alexandria or people that live in the city and work here in the city, it's very difficult to do, as you can see, because it is a lot more expensive to hire folks up in this area or if they live in this area. Alexandria, Northern Virginia, as we know, if I were to hire somebody down in Richmond to come up here, it's already a big swing on the salaries. And based on that, you can see it's about 30% higher. So that's what you'll see on the map that comes up. You're going to see why we have people spread out all over the place. Map here. So as you can see from the little dots everywhere, I went through our current workforce. We have 120 people today. We have 3 people that live way out in Delaware, and our furthest employee lives all the way down in Henrico County. south of here. And all the way up in, we've got some people up in northern Maryland now too. So you can see we're pretty spread out. Probably average commute, if you take all of that, it's probably around 41 minutes. Majority of our jobs, like 3/4 of our jobs, are our plant staff. So there's no remote work available because they have to be on site. We have about 42 office type positions that are eligible for remote work up to 2 days a week is what we have our policy at right now.
Is that 21 Alexandria and Arlington combined? Trying to figure out is that just Alexandria or?
That's Alexandria, but they could be Fairfax, Alexandria. It's just all the zip codes in Alexandria, even though some of that's Fairfax. 15 is where you get to Arlington, and like 16 is over in Prince George. You're gonna stop me if you got any questions. All right, I'll spend a little more time on this one. So when we talk compensation, one of the components we want to reiterate is it's when the compensation philosophy was created, it was talking about salary. The term total compensation is about salary and benefits. So the wages you give folks, the monetary value, and the kind of I'll say non-monetary, but the benefit component is what makes up total compensation. So highlight of the benefit programs, you've probably seen this similar slide before. We currently have one medical plan. We've had United Healthcare for a while now. We have a high deductible plan that's paired with a health savings account. Of course, it's a fully insured plan versus being self-insured. Approximate cost share, we do something a little bit different. We pay a little bit more for employee-only coverage, just slightly less for dependent coverage, but it averages about 85% for all 4 tiers of coverage. And it's an embedded deductible, meaning the deductible can be spent if somebody has a family plan. The individual deductible can be met by multiple people in the family versus every single person has to have the individual deductible met to get to that family deductible. And I know there was some follow-up questions that Mr. Jenks had. Sure, I've got everything covered. You had also asked about the deductible. So our embedded plan, high deductible plans with health savings accounts are governed by the IRS. So the embedded plans in 2024 required that you have at least a $3,200 individual deductible and a $6,400 family deductible. Same thing on the out-of-pocket. They manage that also. So the out-of-pocket costs, so no one employee will pay more than employee only of $4,000 for the year or $8,000 for family. As you may or may not know, high deductible plans are not your typical co-payment type of plans. You reach a deductible, and once you reach a deductible, then what they call co-insurance kicks in. So our co-insurance is 10% that the employee would pay out until they reach that out-of-pocket maximum. And then it stops, the insurance company pays everything.
Or the HSA contribution.
Yeah, and since we've had our high deductible plan in place, we have employer contributed to the health savings account to help offset the large deductible as people were understanding how to use a consumer-driven health plan so that they weren't having big sticker shock with $3,200. So we do supplement and put money into their health savings account, which they can use for medical, dental, vision, all of those types of costs.
How much do we put in?
So for 2024, we put in $2,200 for the employee only, and we put in $4,400 for the family. So when you're explaining you have a $3,200 deductible, we're giving you $2,200 up front in January. You're really only coming out of your own pocket by $1,000. And of course, they can contribute their own money to help cover those costs. The nice thing about health savings accounts, it's not use it or lose it. It's their bank account to take with them even when they go to retirement. They can use it for any of your typical medical related expenses like you would your flexible spending accounts. So if they're the young person in their 20s and they hardly ever go to the doctor, they can really build up their health savings account year over year and have that like little nest egg there for them for retirement expenses, for medical expenses.
The benefits costs you're showing, is that just for the medical, dental, and vision, or is that for all
The
the other?
box of the
benefits?
dental, no, that also includes the retirement. So our dental plan is your typical PPO type of plan. We've had it with Delta Dental for a while. We haven't changed our cost share. We pay 83% of those lines. Visions with United Healthcare, we pay 100% of that. It's a pretty minimal cost. We did move our life and disability in 2024 to Mutual of Omaha. We continued our benefit of 1.5 times the salary. The maximum benefit is $400,000. And then we also continue to pay for short and long-term disability plans. The two big factors that go into that cost increase, one, as you know, medical is unpredictable, and the increases, every year you get reviewed for your increases. So there is about 5% play in the budget for that. Our medical, all of these plans are calendar year. So when you look at our fiscal year, I know the first half of our fiscal year numbers, and the last half I'm guessing. So I put in like 5%, not knowing, and it's a lot about our age of our staff, how the plan's being used, what the underwriters feel they need the profit to be for the insurance company of that year. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. But now that we're just over 100 employees, we get a lot more information throughout the year from our broker. So if our plan runs well, then we're going to reap the rewards and have a low, increase. So we've been very fortunate. And the age of our workforce going down has made a big difference too. But the retirement side, every 2 years, the Virginia retirement system changes their rates for the employer. They are making some administrative changes on how they're handling the hybrid plan going into this fiscal year. So again, we had to guess on what that increase was going to be, because when we prepare the budget, the authorities don't get their rate letters until like March. So we put in like a 1.5% number in there when it actually ended up only being 0.02%. So that's, again, another where a large portion of that increase is in the benefits.
So you're saying it was 0.2, not the 1.5.
Correct.
So
0.02. Went from 8.19 to 8.21 for the next 2 years.
this is the revised budget we get tonight, make that change or didn't. So there's a little bit of room. Question on United Healthcare, on pricing, is there an in-plan and out-of-plan pricing? So that if somebody has, in other words, I'm trying to explain it, with United Healthcare, with other plans, they basically, if you're in plan, that you get a lower rate than if you're
In network and out of network. Correct. Yes. Yes. It's high deductible plans run very similarly to your standard indemnity plans. So you have the in network and out of network. You choose to go out of network, you pay a higher deductible, higher out of pocket costs, and higher co-insurance. Co-insurance goes from 10% to 30%.
You find that when we're recruiting, that people look at this and say, "Oh, this is great," or do they? One is hard to explain because it's not typical. It doesn't get in the way, and people saying, "Oh, that's expensive," or "That's a risk."
When folks haven't been exposed to it, the high deductible plan's been around for a while. When they've never been exposed to it, like I know when Justin got hired a year ago, he's like, "Where's my PPO? Where's my copayment?" So some it takes education, but it took education for our current employees too. But when they see, we also pair it with the health savings account, and really bottom line, yes, they want to know how they use their benefits, but they also want to see what's going to come out of their paycheck. And for the individual employee only coverage for medical, it's only $105 a month. So that, and then within itself, we've been able to keep a very competitive, benefit structure. Because a lot of people are having to pay a lot more for their employee only coverage. So I think that's helped a lot too, because we've been able to keep that down.
So that in general, you say that it's not a problem in a sense. People may have a lot of questions about it, but it doesn't impact their decision on whether.
No. In fact, we've got what did I say? I think you asked that number. How many people? Yeah, we have 91% of our staff currently take our benefits. So I think it's 11 people that don't are on their spouse's plan or still on their parents' plan. Because we have some under 26-year-olds. So, but nobody's going without health insurance because it costs too much or they think it's too expensive. So that's the important part. Make sure they have coverage.
Kind of plan I have. My workplace recently transitioned to a high deductible and I like it. It's been popular actually.
And it gives us a lot of flexibility with that health savings account. So when we have bad years, we can adjust. It's completely discretionary from year to year. So we're not committed or locked into it for have that flexibility. Any other questions? Other benefits that we offer, didn't go into great detail, but we also offer tuition assistance. We recently added paid family leave because we know some of our neighboring Maryland and DC have a paid family leave now. So we have up to 6 weeks of paid family leave. Continue our professional development of our staff. We have our wellness program. Of course, our mental health assistance with our standalone employee assistance program. And a couple other that aren't up here. We have a legal and identity theft program that we pay for the employees. And then another one that we did, again, back in COVID, it's one called Care at Work. And it gives folks the referral services and discounts for not only childcare, emergency childcare, but for elder care and even pet care for that matter. But that was a nice resource, especially during that COVID time where people were looking for those kind of resources and couldn't put their fingers on it. So that really kind of well-rounded employee benefit program. And I know in speaking to our broker, as they meet with lots of different companies, they say far to none, they don't see companies offer quite the suite that we do offer. And these other things here, I'll say are pretty low cost. The big player is the medical insurance. That's the big player when it comes to the overall benefits and retirement.
Are these programs, and I guess the amount of leave that we offer, are they comparable to other utilities in the area?
Yes, I do try to, when we do our comp study, or sometimes even throughout the year between all the different HR folks and the different authorities, we tap out to each other to make sure, are you offering paid family leave or how much PTO are you offering? I think some of them, Upper Occoquan still does vacation and sick. They haven't converted to PTO yet, so yeah, we are still very competitive. I think Prince William County still gives a little bit more on paid time off. But yeah, we feel we have a pretty competitive plan.
To that point, I think not only are we competitive in the public sector, but we also compete with the private sector for hiring staff, which you'll see in a few slides. I think we're also very competitive with some of the private firms that do engineering and wastewater type of work, especially around the family leave piece and the wellness program. Wendy did it in an injustice this evening, but we have a whole month of wellness where we have a day here where we have a bunch of vendors come in here. You can get your blood pressure tested, you can get your vaccines, you can, get your eyes checked. And in addition to that whole month, we give wellness awards up to $750 of wellness points that go into the HSA for completing Walktober and
Different
activities throughout the entire. I've never, 20 years in the industry, I've never seen an organization do that.
Yeah, and wellness is still a big ticket. Just talking to the brokers last week. Mental health is still a big item out there, and wellness is another one that companies are continuing to work on and invest in. A little bit about our apprenticeship program. Just again, trying to give you all the backstory. I'm not sure if you've seen this before. We've had our apprenticeship program. It's a Department of Labor approved apprenticeship program, meaning we agreed to do certain things with the Department of Labor. We've had it in place before I got here, and we restarted it back in 2012. with our control system technicians, which are the electricians. Then the year after, we started it with our wastewater mechanics. Year after that, we started a program with our wastewater operators. The electrical program, the program in the middle, is a 4-year program at this time. We're waiting for the governor to push that through to change it to 2 years. But right now, it's a 4-year program. The other 2 are 2-year programs. So they get there. It's a paid apprenticeship program, so they're paid to learn the trade. And then depending on which track that they're on, we either are bringing in-house instructors for the classroom part of it, or sometimes with the electrical component, they go to school after hours and go over here to like Fairfax Adult Community Education for the 4-year electrical program. So we've been doing this since 2012. And we recognize all of our apprentices during National Apprenticeship Week. And the number of employees that graduated through the apprenticeship program that are still with us and their career movement as they have moved up into the organization.
What's the education requirement to get into the apprenticeship program?
We just do high school diploma or GED, like as a standard. I think with looking at our statistics with education, I think that's still a good base. I know some of the groups down on the rural part of Virginia have to kind of back away from that high school diploma requirement, and the Department of Professional Regulations recognizes that. And so they don't need it to get their license. It just takes them longer, more time on the job. They have different challenges down there. Okay, so that was kind of all the backstory. Now, kind of the results of our compensation study and where we have gone historically since 2012, every 2 years. So we've done this multiple times. When we first put this together in 2012, we actually, worked with the consultant. It was Titan at the time. It's now Gallagher, to actually establish structure. There was not real good structure. So we have established broadband structures. There's 14 different salary lines. Broadband meaning each level crosses over to the next level. We are now, or we have been since 2020, 100% of the staff falls within the range of their appropriate position. When we first started this, we had about a dozen positions that fell on the outside of the range. They were overpaid according to the compensation study. Over time, as salary ranges have changed and moved over to the right, and of course, people have left since then, we now have 100% of our staff are within the ranges.
When you say that, just making sure that I understand it clearly, that we're talking about not what individuals get paid, but the pay grade, the pay band that they're in.
Well, what I mean when we have people that are outside the salary range, so we establish a salary range up to $100,000 as the maximum. And we said that position is in that range. Maybe somebody was making 110. So their wages were frozen on the outside until the range was moved over. That's what it looked like early on. Doesn't look that way anymore. Everybody's right in between the minimum and the maximum.
We talk about how we compare with other jurisdictions. It's the band. How our band compares to their band.
Well, no, it's position. It's position.
Well, I think we're saying the same thing. Whatever the position is, it's the range of the position, put it that way, rather than the band.
Yeah, so maybe when we get to the slide, we'll take a little time to walk through the band on slide 13, but the colors of the band are based on our survey and the position at other locations. And then we set within that band the midpoint and then target 90 to 110%. So we narrow that overall band even down further for our compensation.
Of course, with the structure that we have in place, it helps determine the market value for each position, where they should fall within the ranges. It's our tool that we use for recruiting, retention, promotions. So if somebody's moving from one position to the next, where do they fall in that appropriate band? The salary survey for 24 was conducted by Gallagher. They used 18 published surveys. Plus, they also did a custom survey that we asked them to do, meaning we asked them to target Upper Occoquan, Loudon Water, Fairfax Water. We asked them to target them as our peer group. So that was one additional data point. So you can see the 6 of them participated. Prince William did not. They had some turnover down there in their HR department, so they missed the deadline. But with all those different salary surveys, and that doesn't mean that there was 19 data points for every job we gave them. It just means they used a broad spectrum of salary surveys where they want to find at least 5 data points for position. That's when they feel they've got a good market study, is having at least 5 data points. When they take a look at all of our current positions, before we make any adjustments, and they do the study, and they look at all of our employees and where they are and the average salaries, or as again, 50th percentile midpoint, it's showing that from that 90 to 110% or anything above 110%, we have 101% of our staff, or excuse me, our average compa ratio is 101%. Our staff is currently, 87% of our staff currently being paid from the 90 to 110% above the 110%. Another way to look at it is after they did this study and they looked at our current salary ranges, they're saying 13% of our staff currently under the 90% that we stated in our compensation philosophy, meaning we need to make some adjustments or salary adjustments on that 13% of our population.
Is that 13% of the population that falls below market? Are they in a specific job type, or is it just randomly throughout all of
I noticed that, and you'll see it on the next slide, I noticed, because 13% is about a dozen people, that there was, I'll say, a larger majority in our lab staff. And some reasons behind that is because we've brought in a lot of new lab staff the last couple of years. When they come in as college degreed without any experience, they typically come in closer to that 90%. It takes some time to kind of work up to it. So when we move those salary bands, over to 3% or over 6% every other year, it automatically makes them drop down underneath that 90% again, because because they're still learning. So when you see that information here on this chart, you'll see when you see lab technician down there, that's an average of the lab technicians or an average of the operations technicians. But this detailed chart here, if you look at the very top one, what it's showing you is the entire range from low to high in median or midpoint. And that blue arrow is showing you where our current employee is in that range. So the 90 to 110%, you can see those bars. You can see the 90% to midpoint, or 10% below midpoint, or 10% above midpoint is 110%. And then you can see that blue arrow that our current position of Chief Engineering Officer is just slightly below the midpoint, but still within that 90 to 110% that we stated was our philosophy.
The handout is labeled correctly. There's a mistake just on the word midpoint. It should say AlexRenew salary.
So if you look down to maintenance manager, our current maintenance manager is making right about midpoint. If you go to our engineer 2 positions, we have actually 2 people in that category. They're slightly above the 110%. They've been with us a few years. Based on their years of experience and education, they're sort of just slightly above the 110. As I say, the average of operations technicians at that level is right at that 90%. Again, there's a lot of influx of new people, still a lot of new people in training. We're down to only a handful of people that have been with us 20 plus years. So when you take the average of all those new people and only a couple people up at the high end, you get closer to that 90%. Our help desk technician right there above the 90%, but right below the midpoint. The lab technicians I'm showing you as an illustration. there's of the handful of lab technicians, that's where I'm going to be making some salary adjustments because they're falling below that 90%. And then the couple of service workers we have are just right above the 90%. So this is just I just kind of picked out some positions just to give you some illustrations from all the different salary bands that we have and where some of our current incumbents are, to illustrate where we've been able to keep everything between that 90 to 110%. We kind of do the survey. It's kind of like doing an audit. It says, oh, we need to move things over to the right a little bit based on cost of living. And in turn, there are some salary adjustments that we're going to need to make.
Mr. Jinks, to answer your question, the bands, the big colored bars are results from the survey. That's the survey, low, high, and midpoint.
And those bands are based upon their salary scales, the range is for particular positions, as opposed to their average pay for individuals. That's two different measures. I mean, you can say, I understand it correctly. The blue triangles are what our average we're paying people.
Correct.
So as you said, if lab technicians are all fairly new, they're going to be falling a little bit below.
Mhm.
When we survey the other jurisdictions, we asking what their average pay for all the individuals added together. Are we saying you have engineers? What's your pay range for engineers?
They actually ask for the average pay. When they survey like Upper Occoquan, they say, if you have an engineer position that is relatively the same as what our engineering job description is, we ask for their average pay.
And that's what this represents, is averages of people, or is this pay?
Well, that's just the data. That's just the data point they get from the survey.
Okay, but what is this range? Is this, if you looked at what the salary scale is in those jurisdictions and kind of,
No, it's not the salary scale. It's just the actual positions.
What people are actually earning.
Correct. What the people are actually earning.
meaning?
So they get all those data points, all those average salaries from all those different positions. And they get at least 5 data points. So they get like 5 different published salary sites that said an engineer 2 should make $100,000 a year. And they average those 5 data points together. Then they take our salary structure, the 14 bands that I said we have a salary structure. So we have a minimum and a midpoint and a maximum. We've got 14 of those bands that overlap each other. And we look at the position and we say, engineers, an average of 100K. Where is it best slotted closest to the midpoint of those 14 salary bands? And that's how we get to this illustration here. So we check to see if the position is slotted correctly, or do we need to move it up a pay band or down a pay band?
So if the other jurisdictions have employees who are longer tenured, the number is going to be higher.
Yes, very possible.
Because we're not looking at the scale they're using, we're looking
Right.
at I'll use this term, the happenstance, the randomness of how things just plain happen.
Yeah, and so that's why it's important, like our operations technicians or even our maintenance technicians having levels, so that we're getting the average salary of an apprentice versus an average salary of somebody with 10 years experience. So by creating those levels, it helps create and it helps us with our career pathway, but it helps create those differences so that Upper Occoquan's just not feeding us their average from this big pool of people. They give us their average of their entry level people, average of their couple year people, average of their more senior people. Try to really do it as close apples to apples as we can.
We got the results of this study after the initial development of the budget, correct?
Correct. Yeah, they started the work in January and we just got the results a week ago.
Okay, and so I'm assuming that any changes that result from it are not reflected in the budget right now.
We did. We added a % of pay. So when you see that the personnel expense of 5%, a percentage of that was set aside for salary adjustments, not knowing what it was going to show. In reality, it's only going to cost us about $40,000 to make those salary adjustments because we're in pretty good shape. Very few changes, and overall, we're in pretty good shape. Last slide, again, just kind of the takeaways. We talked before about Alexandria being 30% higher generally over the entire state of Virginia. But another way to look at it is Alexandria City nationwide. You look at the nationwide is 100%. We're about 17% higher nationwide when it comes to cost of living. So if we're recruiting outside the area, which happens occasionally, we can keep that in mind. So if we're trying to recruit an engineer from Colorado, where we can already go, oh, okay, what's Colorado's cost of living compared to the national average, compared to Alexandria, and that helps us make sure we're negotiating a good salary too. It was to say, we've had our average comp ratios at 101%, 87% of our staff are currently being paid competitively, about 13% need adjustments. The recommendation from our consultant was to move our salary ranges over 6%, which is 3% for each year, because we do this every 2 years. That is in line with the cost of living movement over the last 2 years and to keep us in good ranges for the upcoming 2 years.
But that's completely separate from the $40,000 that we would have to adjust the existing salaries. So the 6%, we're moving people over, but most of the people are already in that band, so it's not
It's not,
impacting.
we're not moving people 6%, just the
You're moving
ranges,
bands though.
just moving bands.
That's what I mean. So, but most of our people are already within the band, so there's not going to be a need for adjustment of 6%. It's just the bands that are moving 6%.
And even the adjustment for some like those lab technicians, it's not necessarily 6%, it may only be like 3%, just to get them to that 90% component. I have to think of a better way to explain that because I get employees confused every time we tell them this. They see 6%, they're like, oh, I'm getting a 6% pay increase. I'm like, no, sorry.
The opportunity went up.
Yeah, it happens every 2 years. Any other questions? Lots of information, probably pieces you haven't seen before. But
Good presentation.
Mhm.
It's a lot of information, but it's a good presentation.
I know Mr. Carl will get back with you on your thoughts about the compensation philosophy and how we want to make any changes going forward.
No, I think we have some of our own ideas. You know, this was brought up. I think there were questions about our benefits over the course of the last few months, and there's questions about our compensation study. So we wanted to share the results now that we have them. And I think there are some changes that staff would like to propose to the compensation philosophy, really bringing in the discussion of total compensation, not just looking at salaries, to make sure that's reflective of the other things we're doing as an organization. So from our standpoint, that's something we'd like to revisit. I think if the board has any ideas based on the current compensation philosophy, if there's any ideas that you would like to propose, we can discuss those. We'll leave it on the topic, an agenda topic of unfinished business. So the next couple of board meetings, we can kind of have discussions around the compensation philosophy. I think we'd like to change the name of the policy to compensation policy, but that and some changes to the total compensation.
And Mr. Jinks, some of your questions that I know came out in the memo, one question that I did not address. You asked the question, do lower paid employees, such as people below the average median salary, have a different rate of health insurance? Is that what you were asking? Do they pay differently than maybe somebody paid higher?
That's one of my questions.
Yeah, okay. So I answered the question, but I also just wanted to give a little bit more of a backstory because I checked with our broker. That strategy to have different deductions for people that maybe make less than the average salary of the whole, that kind of came out again during ACA timeframes to make sure the blue collar workers weren't negatively affected by the healthcare reform, kind of setting maximum contributions or maximum deductions that they would have out of a paycheck. Think about hospitality, people that make minimum wage, that really kind of, again, we're only a 100-person organization, but it really comes into play in some of those industries where they're paying people minimum wage. Just so that everybody knows, our average salaries for our non-exempt workforce, our hourly folks out in the field, is about $77,000 a year. So our $106 a month for employee only deduction, we think that's a very fair rate for somebody making $77,000 a year. So it's not a strategy that we've looked at doing, but I wanted to make sure I was answering your question and did a little bit more background for you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think the fact for your earlier statistic that basically everybody is accounted for says that people are not
Choosing not to be insured.
choosing not to be insured because they can't afford it. They're
And that's the, yeah,
kind of grit their teeth a little bit, but they're elected. which
yeah,
is
that's the balance. We, every year that we look at it, the balance between budget and kind of answer to the ratepayers to what the employees need out of a benefit and what can they paycheck. So really trying to balance all that. And we've been very lucky lately.
Any other questions? Ms. Callahan, thank you. Very
Yes, welcome.
good presentation.
On to outcomes.
Yes.
So in the monthly report, a few items to highlight. Start out on page 2. We're about a year into the job order contracts that the board endorsed about this time last year, maybe a month after this. Just want to show how much work in that table. We continue to update this month over month. We spent nearly, $3 million on our IR&R budget to be able to upgrade some things that critically needed it at the plant. You can see how many projects we have ongoing, right now through our job order contract. So it's been a very, very beneficial avenue for us to procure contractual work, and it's pretty well spread between our 3 contractors. Another item to highlight on page 2 is safety. We have we're going on a year of no lost time. In addition to that, we just completed a organizational wide. When did we start that, Wendy? 6 months?
December.
We started in December. We started behavioral based training for all staff through a program called Safe Start. 4 modules that we all went through that were very interactive to really get staff to start thinking about safety 24/7 here, on the way home and at home. We've seen a shift in culture around safety because of that program. We'll be culminating the success of completing that training in Safety Month in June. We'll have a guest speaker from Safe Start coming out to talk to our staff as well. We also completed OSHA 10-hour for all of our plant staff. Another
Talk about the contracting. Where did we end up with the General Assembly and the bill you were worried about?
We can no longer shortlist. We can no longer use previous design build or CMAR experience to shortlist. So at the first step phase, we cannot use previous experience for shortlisting. We can do it in the second step, and that was our big win. Doesn't make any sense, but at least we can do it at some point.
Why did
Oh.
they do that? What was the justification?
So what happened is the smaller contractors in other parts of the state have been lobbying for a decade to make design bid build the de facto choice of procurement in the state. And that's because a lot of the universities that they had worked for had went to these collaborative delivery models, and they were missing out on work. These contractors were missing out on work because they didn't have the experience to qualify to be shortlisted. What happened is over the years, this happened last year, but the universities were able to push back on it, as well as a few of the construction firms lobbying against it. We were involved last year as well. Over the summer, AGC, American General Contractors Association, or Association of General Contractors, sorry. And some of these contractors had a summer session, a work session to make changes to the code to make design bid build de facto for institutions, that section of the code. What happened is when it got to the GA, it overflowed out of institutions into localities, Aaron, and into authorities like us, and impacted our sections of the code with language now that we pushed back to the point where design bid build it should be the only way we move a job forward. To get to this collaborative delivery, we have to come to the board for every single project we want to use for collaborative delivery moving forward, get your buy off on it. And then during the selection process, we cannot use previous CMAR or CMGC or design build experience as a pre-qualification. Their word, not mine, shortlist factor.
So does that mean you just end up having to interview at the second stage, a whole lot more people than, or more people?
Or
than
you
did the first
shortlist
time?
more, yeah. So
Any
there
way
are,
we can provide as a board, a blanket authority that covers a period of time of, now it's each and every one.
so a big, yeah, the reason we spent 2 hours at 2 hours of VWWAA as part of a panel discussion discussing this specific issue. And myself, Ashley Harrison, who supports us on our procurement documents, Mike Lulakis, Preston Bryant were on the panel talking through the changes and why it's important for the authorities to kind of band together when this happens to show up and, voice concern. So it was never intended to impact us, but how it rolled out. We were 2 days away from it going in, 2 days away from it going into, well, it went into conference committee, got booted to conference committee, which was good. And they signed it, they approved it 2 days before session ended. So we're worse off. Virginia's worse off. We're going backwards. We're going backwards in Virginia compared to the rest of the country.
There was a statement by Mike that said he does not want to see additional.
Oh, yeah. So there's now a 5-year moratorium that you can't make changes to that section of the code.
They can't take it further, but we also can't walk it back. There won't be an appetite for it.
Told Ms. Waters that we lost.
I think we sort of won.
Quite tenacious.
It could have been worse.
Could have been worse.
It was good to see that we got a lot of support from consultants. We got a lot of support from DBIA, Design Build Institute of America, where Ms. Fian is this evening. We got support from the Water Collaborative Design Build Association, Underground Construction Association. Various contractors came out to bat and, helped us with the lobby. But it had gone too far at that point based on the work group session that happened over the summer.
And this will lead to more process, but in the end, being able to consider experience for reward is.
Yeah, you can, yes, that too.
Good, thank you.
Other thing to highlight, and Ms. Waters, I want her to give a quick update about a meeting that we've got set up with Arlandria Chiralagua. It seems like our delinquencies have stabilized after our customer care systems change. You can see that our delinquencies over the last month decreased very slightly, $6,000. We've also been, as a group, doing our own research and looking into our commercial accounts. As you know, some of our commercial accounts are made up of residential renters that are classified under a larger commercial bill. One of the things we're doing right now is we're trying to reach out to our large commercial customers and get an understanding of how they're passing on the AlexRenew bill from us to them. We know they have sub-meters, things like that. And as part of that process, we also got in touch with the board at Arlandria Chiralagua, which is about $300,000 of our commercial delinquency. And I'll let Ms. Waters tell you what our next steps are with Arlandria Chiralagua. If the board's not familiar
This
with
is
it.
the co-op, the residential cooperative.
You're very familiar with
behind
them.
Mom's Organic.
As I was researching them, your name was coming a lot in that the city has extended loans to this co-op. It's the residents have an ownership interest in the real estate, and it's a low-income area of housing. This delinquency has been building for some time. Mr. Robertson and his team has been trying to collect. They've been on payment plans 3 times and have fallen off or more.
Oh, way more. Because they have separate locations, so they have payment plans for each one. I asked Hans, I mean, I could see just on the list that they had defaulted probably 10+ times. But Hans said it was way higher than that, because you're talking over 4 or 5 years.
We reached out to the city and we learned why this was happening. The city right now is working with the co-op to provide technical assistance in exchange for loan forgiveness, I believe. And part of that is assisting them with budgeting. So what had been occurring is that they were not billing residents for enough to cover all the utilities. And because we were not disconnecting service, AlexRenew was the one that didn't get paid. So as moving forward, the meeting that we have next Thursday with their board and the city is to get them on track with a payment schedule that will be overseen by the city. That we'll try to arrive at a number that's reasonable, that won't be too much of a hit for the residents, but will then keep them consistently paying us monthly to try to work down that balance. So it's good news in that a large part of a delinquency is tied up with one entity, and we've got a path forward. But it's probably not good news for the residents there who are going to see their.
This has been a co-op for decades back in the last century, and probably 15 years ago, something like that, they went through an internal civil war, if you will, who's going to actually be in charge. And it got very, very messy, but the management of it has been problematic from day one. Plus, the other thing the city's probably still doing is looking at what improvements need to be made. The place is falling apart. If not, and they hadn't paid our bills, so guess what? They haven't reinvested to make the capital maintenance they really need to do to keep the building in shape. They haven't had the money. So it's been a challenging situation for a long time.
Sort of schedule on shutoffs.
We're currently communicating that shutoffs will start in July after the election. And I think there's some, right now we're promoting payment plans. LEAP just reviewed the flyer with Mr. Robertson, what was it, last week?
Mhm.
The new flyer going out in our billing insert, trying to get people to sign up for payment plans and notify them of LEAP and how to register. I think the other update on revenue dashboard, I think we're all there on Saturday and part of the event. We don't have, I wish we would have had a clicker at the gate, but I can't even estimate how many people were there. It was well attended. It exceeded our expectations. And it was, for us, I think, you know, we were, there was an Alex Times article that came out today. The reporter asked us what was the reason you do this? And, you know, you say, you know, cleaner water, you're going to set a foundation for the future. I think, you know, after we answered that question, saw people literally running up to Hazel and like looking at the machine and just being there in awe, people standing there shaking their arms like this, getting pictures taken. I think for me, that's probably the biggest highlight I've had on this program, you know, to date. That's going back to 2017, to see people react the way they did, because, you know, you're never going to know that tunnel's there. And for people to come out and interact with the equipment, the staff and the machine, it was awesome. Definitely a huge highlight for our team, a big win for, you know, our team and the trailer team for supporting it. So I think it was very unique.
I'm just looking at this and the waterfront tunnel, 100% hazel on surface.
He's on surface
Hazel
and
on surface.
Mr. Robertson said they took the Alamac out of the shaft, or they are tomorrow, so that's gonna severely dampen our tour. So I think those days are behind us. No more muck boots.
It was a great event. It was very well put together. The staff were very helpful. The exhibits were interesting. Just like everybody had a good time.
I want to specifically thank you all or whoever was responsible for getting the site ready for the public. But one of my friends commented to me that they were so grateful that the site was accessible. Like you could navigate it without having to go up and down stairs. It's just great. Like the way it was set up was just very welcoming.
Anything else before we go to closed session? Pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A3 and 8. I move that the Board of this Authority enter into a closed meeting for consultation, with legal counsel in the Carlisle Plaza, Block 32 real property matter. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Hi.
Right.
Thank you all very much.